Red Hollow, Colorado. January. Before the world wakes, the land is already buried in white. The wind claws at the half-frozen graveyard, and the old cottonwoods creak under the weight of ice. Only the living can shiver. Only the living can mourn. Jasper Holloway stands alone, boots sinking into fresh snow, his breath fogging in the bitter dawn. He's still wearing his sheriff's uniform, the badge pinned heavy above his heart, though the metal brings him no comfort now. His gloved hands grip a battered, frayed halter, a patchwork of leather and hope that once belonged to Sundance. Sundance. The brown American paint horse who'd carried him through wildfires, floods, and the kind of nights you never speak of, not even to your God. Sundance, whose casket now lies half-hidden beneath the drifting snow, no honor guard, no eulogy, just Jasper and the howling wind. He closes his eyes. The storm's roar drowned out by memories. Sundance crashing through a line of riot shields, teeth bared not out of rage but loyalty, shoving Jasper out of the way as shots rang out. Screams, confusion, the smell of gunpowder mixing with blood and sweat. Jasper survived. Sundance didn't. That's what they all said. But the pain doesn't fit into words. The world expects men like Jasper to bury their feelings deep, to keep the pain behind the badge, to go back to work and let the earth take care of the dead. He tries. He fails. He looks around. The graveyard is empty except for his truck, dusted white and a single crow, perched high above, watching with bright, cold eyes. No one from the department has come. Not the captain, not the men he once called brothers. Not a single salute. Only silence. He kneels, knees cracking, and places the halter atop the casket. His fingers linger on the worn leather, tracing the notches Sundance made in moments of boredom or nerves. Jasper can still smell the horse, mud, hay, and something wild beneath. He bites his lip. The cold seeps into his bones. Suddenly, the wind shifts, shrieking through the bare trees. For a heartbeat, Jasper swears he hears a sound. Faint, desperate, not the wind, not the crows. A whinny. Sundance's whinny, rising up from the grave, so real it freezes Jasper in place. No, he mutters, shaking, rubbing at his eyes. But the sound lingers, echoing in the spaces where grief becomes guilt. Last night, he'd tried to write a letter for the department newsletter. Something about sacrifice, duty, courage. The words never came. Instead, he remembered the look on his captain's face after the raid, a flash of pity quickly replaced by cold calculation. It was the horse or you, Jasper. You did what you could. But Jasper remembers more than that. He remembers how the body was hustled away. How he was told not to speak to the vet. How the official report arrived, all tidy lines and half-truths. Now, the world is silent but for the storm. He stands, brushes the snow from his pants, and turns back to the truck. The engine coughs when he starts it, reluctant to wake. He drives home on numb autopilot, tires crunching over ice, Sundance's halter beside him on the passenger seat. He passes the shuttered gas station, the diner where he used to grab coffee with Sundance tied out front, drawing kids and tourists who marveled at the calm, brown giant. The town looks the same, but something underneath has shifted. The looks he gets at stoplights are colder now, some mournful, others accusing, like they blame him for losing the horse, or for surviving at all. Jasper parks outside his cabin. The wind slams the door as he enters. He's too tired to take off his boots, too tired to light the stove. He sets the halter on the kitchen table, staring at it, as if the answers might rise from the scars. That night, sleep won't come. Every time he closes his eyes, he sees Sundance, sometimes whole, sometimes broken, always watching him with that steady, forgiving gaze. He tries to pray, but the words stick in his throat. He doesn't remember falling asleep, but at some point near midnight, headlights sweep across his frosted window. A crunch of footsteps, then retreat. Jasper bolts upright, heart hammering. He grabs his revolver, steps outside, scanning the night. Nothing but snow, falling thicker now. But as he turns back, he sees it. A scrap of paper tucked under his windshield wiper, the ink smeared by wind and cold. He snatches it up, scanning the words by porch light. Sundance didn't die the way they told you. Start digging. His breath freezes in his chest. He stares into the darkness, the old fear rising. Fear not just of loss, but of betrayal. The kind that starts with a whisper and ends with a gunshot in the night. Inside, he locks every door and window. He places the halter by his bed, the note tucked beneath it. He will not sleep again that night. The storm rages on, but Jasper's mind is already racing, replaying every detail of Sundance's last day. Somewhere out there, someone knows what really happened. Someone wants Jasper to find the truth. He looks down at the halter, at the deep scars, at the old brass tag stamped with the word loyal. His jaw clenches. For the first time since the funeral, Jasper feels something that isn't just grief. It's anger. It's resolve. He will not let Sundance's story end in silence. Jasper sat at the edge of his bed as the storm battered the windows, the note heavy in his hands. Sundance didn't die the way they told you. Start digging. He read it again, searching for some hint. Handwriting, scent, a clue in the way the cess curled. Nothing. Just a chill crawling up his spine. He pulled on his parka and left before dawn, making his way across town, headlights sweeping over snowdrifts and the hollow shells of old barns. He parked outside a small, dimly lit house at the edge of the woods. Detective Lila Maris lived alone here, her place guarded by a battered pickup and two rescue mutts barking at the window. She opened the door before he knocked. Her hair tangled from sleep, but her eyes clear, sharp as ever. "Couldn't wait for morning?" she asked, her voice dry, but she let him in. Jasper handed her the note. Lila scanned it in silence, then looked up. "You sure this isn't someone's idea of a sick joke?" "I don't think so. It feels off." "And there's more," Jasper said, reaching into his jacket and retrieving a folded autopsy report he'd managed to pry from the department's administrative assistant, who owed him too many favors. They sat at her kitchen table as the coffee percolated, the dogs pacing at their feet. Lila read the report, her lips thinning as she traced the lines with her finger. "Official story was a bullet wound," she said. "But the report, puncture on the neck, bruising but no exit wound." He nodded, voice rough. "Vet was told to close the file. Dr. Tran, she called me last night, said something didn't sit right, that she wasn't allowed to keep the body for tests." Lila shook her head. "It never stops, does it? Red Hollow always buries the mess." They drove together through the swirling snow, stopping at the veterinary clinic before sunrise. Dr. Hallie Tran, her face lined with exhaustion, met them at the back entrance. She hustled them into her cramped office, closing the blinds. "I don't have long," she whispered. "They're watching, but I couldn't just let it go." She slid a manila envelope across the table, X-rays, close-up photos, and notes scrawled in hurried handwriting. Lila flipped through them, frowning. No evidence of a bullet. This, she pointed to the X-ray, where a faint, needle-thin shadow appeared along the neck, isn't consistent with any wound reported. "Sedative injection, maybe?" Dr. Tran suggested, voice shaking. Whatever it was, It wasn't an accident. And look here. She tapped a photograph, showing the underside of Sundance's jaw. This bruising matches the pattern of a rope, maybe a wire. Not a struggle with people, more like restraint. Jasper clenched his fists, anger rising in waves. They made it look like a heroic sacrifice. But they murdered him. Dr. Tran nodded, sliding a flash drive across the table. Here are the original files. Don't let them vanish too. Lila glanced at Jasper. And the body cam footage? Jasper's face darkened. Gone. Wiped from the server. Not even the tech guys know how. But whoever did it, they had access. And something to hide. Dr. Tran leaned in, whispering, "Don't trust anyone in uniform until you know who's behind this." They left the clinic as the sun rose, casting pale gold across the snow. The world looked unchanged, but for Jasper, everything had shifted. Back at Jasper's cabin, they sat by the fire, piecing together the evidence. Jasper dug out Sundance's belongings. Bridle, blanket, the old training whistle he still couldn't bring himself to throw away. He ran his fingers over the leather of the bridle, pausing at a series of jagged marks scratched deep into the surface. "You ever see this before?" he asked Lila. She squinted, then shook her head. "Could be a code. Horses are smart. He ever use it to get your attention?" Jasper's mind drifted back. Night patrols, Sundance stomping and snorting, sometimes agitated for no reason. He always tried to tell me things. Even the last night, he was anxious. He wouldn't go near the barn, stomped, tossed his head. Lila pulled out her phone, snapping pictures of the marks. "Let me see what I can dig up. In the meantime, keep your head down." That night, Jasper couldn't rest. Every creak of the house felt like a threat. He checked the windows, double-locked the doors, and kept his service revolver on the nightstand. As midnight approached, he heard a truck engine out on the county road. Then nothing. When he checked, he saw fresh tire tracks in the snow, too wide for a regular pickup. The next morning, Jasper went to the sheriff's office. The place felt colder, emptier. He noticed whispers, sideways glances. His captain avoided his eyes. When he asked for a copy of the body cam archive, he was told the files were corrupted and irretrievable. He nodded, pretending to accept the lie, all the while seething inside. He retreated to the locker room, staring at his own reflection. Red eyes, the lines around his mouth deeper than he remembered. He wondered how many secrets this place had swallowed. How many more there might be. Outside, the world looked deceptively peaceful. Jasper met Lila at the edge of town, where the old church looked down on Red Hollow like a silent judge. Lila was waiting, hands deep in her coat pockets. She nodded at his approach. "I did some digging. The marks on Sundance's bridle. They match an old code we used in the mounted patrol. Directions, warnings, even names. Your horse was trying to tell you something, Jasper." Jasper's heart thudded. "What does it mean?" She smiled grimly. "It's coordinates, out by the abandoned logging barn. You think you're ready?" Jasper didn't hesitate. "Let's go, for Sundance." As they drove into the snow-laden hills, neither spoke. They didn't need to. Both understood that the road ahead was dark and twisted, and that now there was no turning back. In Jasper's chest, hope flickered for the first time since the funeral. Sundance's story wasn't over, not yet. The logging barn was nothing more than a shadow at the edge of Red Hollow, half collapsed, hunched against the winter wind. It stood like a memory too stubborn to fade. The snow in front was unbroken, except for two sets of boot prints, Jasper's and Lila's, trailing out from where they'd parked behind a tangled row of barbed wire fence. Jasper paused at the doorway, letting the silence settle over him. Inside, the smell of old hay, oil, and dust clung to the air. He reached for the bridle in his pocket, running his thumb over the coated scratches. His pulse slowed, breath fogging in the beams of early light that pierced through holes in the barn's roof. This was Sundance's place. Lila's voice was soft, as if afraid to disturb something sacred. "Yeah," Jasper said, "when he needed space. After a rough rescue or a storm, he'd come out here. I'd sit with him. Sometimes. I think he understood me better than any person ever could." Lila wandered near a row of empty stalls. Jasper drifted to the corner where Sundance always liked to rest. His mind flickered with memories. Sundance pawing at the earth, flicking his ears, restless in a way Jasper never quite understood. He crouched down, and by instinct more than reason, brushed away layers of straw and dirt. A faint set of hoof marks lingered, older than the snowfall, pressed deep into the hard-packed earth. Next to them, he found a piece of wood, worn smooth, the kind a horse might chew when anxious. He traced the grain, searching for meaning. He remembered Sundance on their last day together. The raid, the chaos. Sundance had blocked Jasper's path, not to escape, but as if trying to warn him. In that instant, Jasper had felt annoyance, even anger. Now, the memory gnawed at him. "He was trying to keep me out of the barn," Jasper said, voice rough. "Like he knew something I didn't." Lila knelt beside him, watching with the patience of someone who knows the language of grief. Horses sense things. They know when people mean harm. They know when the world goes off its rails. Jasper let himself sink into the memory. Sundance's body between him and danger. The frantic stamp of hooves. The look in those deep, searching eyes. Even in death, Sundance's warnings echoed through his mind, louder now that the world had gone quiet. The barn's silence was interrupted by the wind rattling the loose boards. Lila stood and walked toward a forgotten tack trunk wedged in the shadows. She pried it open with effort, the hinges screeching in protest. Inside, old brushes, a faded blue halter, not Sundance's, and a child's drawing. A stick-figure boy with a wide brown horse beside him, labeled Cole plus Ranger. Jasper turned the bridle over in his hands, remembering something Dr. Tran had said about the puncture wounds, the wire marks. He lined up the scratches with the edge of the stall. The sequence matched old patrol codes from his academy days. Stay away, danger, trust broken. Sundance had tried, even in pain, to warn him. Lila broke the silence. "My brother Luke was on the force. He died in a cover-up too. No one believed me when I started digging. I was treated like a problem, not a sister in mourning. If you want to stop, Jasper, I get it." He shook his head, the grief morphing into something steely. "I can't stop. Not now. Not after everything he gave me, not after this." Outside, the snow started falling harder, muffling the world, making the barn feel more like a secret room, set apart from time. Jasper pressed his palm to the wooden beam, as if Sundance might still be listening. "I used to talk to him about everything," Jasper said, "after a bad call, after I lost my partner. He never judged, just listened." Lila nodded, her own eyes misty. "We're trained to keep our pain out of sight. It eats us, though. Sometimes the only way out is through." They sat there a long time, two people and the ghost of a horse, wrapped in silence. Jasper let the grief breathe, let it open him up until the ache was more bearable. When they finally stood, Jasper tucked the bridle under his arm and moved toward the far stall. The wood slats were scratched with a familiar pattern, Sundance's anxious language, desperate for someone to understand. Jasper took pictures, sent them to Lila's phone. They would decode every last message. They owed him that. Lila found a rusted tin under a pile of broken tack. Inside, a half-burned page from a stable log, the words nearly lost to water stains but still legible. Cole Jensen, missing. Ranger, unaccounted. Sundance, injured, removed from active roster. Jasper stared at the page. Cole's just a kid. Ranger's another SR horse. Someone's been hiding more than just Sundance's death. The wind outside shifted, whistling through the barn, carrying with it the faintest sound. A whinny maybe, or just the wind. Jasper let himself believe, just for a heartbeat, that Sundance was out there, urging him forward. They left the barn, hearts heavier but with new purpose. The sun was struggling to break through the clouds, painting Red Hollow in shades of gold and blue. Jasper looked back once, certain he saw a brown shadow in the doorway, loyal, watchful, gone too soon but never truly lost. That night, Jasper dreamed of Sundance, not broken or dying, but running free across fields washed in dawn light, hooves thundering, eyes bright, mane wild in the wind. He woke with tears on his cheeks and a new kind of resolve burning in his chest. Some wounds would never heal, but the truth could still be found. Sundance's story wasn't finished, and neither was Jasper's. Jasper returned to the old logging barn the next morning, snow crunching beneath his boots, sunlight sharpening the frost that had gathered along the roof's jagged edge. He came alone at first, needing space to think, to breathe, to let Sundance's memory settle before he pulled more people into the orbit of this growing darkness. Inside, the barn was colder than he remembered, filled with the hush of forgotten days. He walked the length of the aisle, eyes adjusting to the gloom, and found himself pausing beside the stall where he'd discovered the child's drawing, a boy and a horse, Cole plus Ranger. He turned the paper over, searching for a date, a sign, a message left by frightened hands. But all he found was a greasy fingerprint, half smudged. Jasper's fingers trailed the stall door. He listened, letting the quiet wrap around him. He remembered Sundance's way of standing here, head lowered, as if the weight of the world rested on those broad, scarred shoulders. A car engine rattled outside, breaking the silence. Jasper stepped into the pale strip of sunlight and watched as Lila's battered pickup rumbled up the drive. She wasn't alone. Dr. Hallie Tran was in the passenger seat, her eyes wary but determined. Lila greeted Jasper with a nod. "You left your phone on last night. Thought you might need backup." Dr. Tran slid from the truck, carrying a worn leather satchel. "I went through the stable logs again," she said, her breath forming small clouds in the air. "There's something here, something we missed." Jasper led them inside. Together they fanned out, scanning every corner of the barn. Lila combed through the tack trunk. Dr. Tran scoured the logs and broken crates. Jasper returned to the stalls, brushing aside loose hay. There, half hidden, he spotted a faded blue halter, initials RJ stitched into the cheekpiece. "Ranger," Dr. Tran murmured. She took the halter from Jasper's hands, tracing the fabric with trembling fingers. "He was supposed to be retired. They told me he'd been adopted by a family out west." Her voice cracked. "But this doesn't look like it's been touched in months." Jasper noticed something strange. The halter's lining was thick, as if it had been tampered with. He pulled at the stitching, and a small object tumbled free. A glass microchip, barely larger than a grain of rice. Lila snapped on a pair of gloves, examining it under the light. This is tech way above your average ranch. These things are used to track livestock, but this one's encrypted. Someone didn't want these horses found. Dr. Tran nodded, swallowing hard. A few years back, I lost a rescue horse. Disappeared after an accident during a search and rescue op. The story never made sense, but the department stonewalled me. Now I know why. Jasper's gaze drifted to the far wall, where a pile of burned papers lay scattered in a metal bucket. He picked through the ashes, fingertips blackening, until he found a half-charred sheet. The words "Stable Log January" were still visible, alongside a list of horses' names, each one checked off in shaky pencil. Beside Ranger, the word "retired" had been crossed out and overwritten with "missing." And below that, Cole Jensen, and a set of GPS coordinates. Lila pulled out her phone, entering the numbers into a map app. That's not far, right on the edge of the state forest. She turned to Dr. Tran. You ever hear anything about kids going missing around here? Dr. Tran hesitated, then nodded. There were rumors. I heard about Cole, 10 years old, vanished last winter. They said he ran away, but... She trailed off, shaking her head. A silence hung between them, heavy with implication. Jasper stared at the burned log, the halter, the microchip. This isn't about one horse. It's bigger. Kids, horses, files going missing. People being told to keep quiet. The barn seemed to draw tighter around them, as if holding its breath. Suddenly, a small voice called out from behind the hay bales. Who's there? All three turned sharply. A child's face peeked out, freckled, cheeks dirty, eyes wild with fear. Jasper moved slow, hands open. It's okay. We're not here to hurt you. The boy emerged, thin, shivering, clinging to a tattered backpack. I was hiding. I saw men come at night. They yelled about the horses. I heard them say my name. I thought they were looking for me. Jasper knelt, his heart breaking. You're Cole. The boy nodded. Lila stepped forward gently. We want to help you. Do you remember what happened? Cole's voice was barely a whisper. I heard Ranger at night. He kicked at the stall until I let him loose. Then the men came, so I ran. I think Ranger saved me. Dr. Tran knelt beside Cole, offering a bottle of water. You're safe now, I promise. Jasper glanced at Lila, the weight of the moment sinking in. They had found more than clues. They had found a survivor, a living link to the barn's secrets. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the old boards. But inside, the circle of trust grew. Jasper, Lila, Dr. Tran, and now Cole, each carrying their own scars, each bound by the shared burden of truth. Jasper stood, steadier now. We need to get Cole somewhere safe, and we need to find Ranger. Dr. Tran nodded, her resolve shining through the exhaustion. If there's a chance he's alive, I want to be there when you find him. They left the barn together, the past still echoing behind them, but hope, faint and fragile, beginning to stir. In the distance, a brown horse's silhouette appeared on the hill, watching as they disappeared into the trees. Whether it was Ranger or just a trick of the light, Jasper couldn't say. But for the first time in weeks, he felt a spark inside. Something Sundance had always given him. The promise that even in the coldest winters, loyalty and courage could bring the lost back home. Jasper sat with Cole in the back seat of Lila's truck as they made their way out of the forest, the engine rattling against the cold. Dr. Tran drove, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. Lila watched the rearview mirror, alert for anything out of place. No one spoke until the barn was far behind, Red Hollow's silhouette just visible under the pale morning sky. They brought Cole to Dr. Tran's house on the outskirts of town, tucked between bare cottonwoods and a half-frozen creek. The place was quiet, safe. Jasper watched as Cole curled up on the living room sofa, Ranger's halter clutched tightly in his small hands, eyes wide but finally at rest. Dr. Tran covered him with a thick quilt and left out soup and bread, just in case. In the kitchen, Lila spread their evidence across the table. Sundance's bridle, the burned stable log, the microchip, and Cole's whispered memories, pieced together like a broken code. The night's discoveries haunted Jasper, looping in his mind like a fever dream. He leaned on the counter, staring at the halter, his voice low. If they lied about Ranger, they lied about Sundance, about Cole, about all of it. Lila looked tired, but her eyes were sharper than ever. This is more than a cover-up, Jasper. It's organized. It's systematic. Dr. Tran turned the microchip over in her hand, reading the faint etchings beneath a magnifying glass. I can pull the data from this, but I'll need time, and I'll need to keep it off the clinic's system. Someone's watching there. I saw a sheriff's cruiser parked down the block twice this week, just idling. Jasper's chest tightened. They're keeping tabs on all of us. Lila tapped the stable log, pointing to the GPS coordinates and the scribbled notes. Apex Ranching Services. I remember the name. They came in a couple years ago, bought up the old feed lot, promised jobs, said they wanted to modernize livestock management. Since then, horses and kids go missing. Anyone who asks questions gets stonewalled. Jasper ran a hand through his hair. We need more than suspicion. We need someone inside, someone who knows how this works. Lila nodded grimly. I might know someone. Greg Dalton. He and I joined the force together. He left a few years back, took a job with Apex's security. We're not exactly friends anymore, but if anyone knows what's going on behind the curtain, it's him. As Lila dialed Greg's number, Jasper paced, fighting the old itch to act, to storm the gate and demand answers. But he forced himself to wait, to listen. Every nerve felt frayed, every memory of Sundance like a cut that wouldn't heal. Greg answered after 4 rings, his voice gravelly, guarded. Lila, haven't heard from you in a while. We need to talk, Lila said, in person, about Apex, and about what happened to the SAR horses. A long pause. You're treading on thin ice. Meet me at the old ranger station in 30. The ride out was tense. Jasper's mind replayed every time he'd trusted the badge, every time he'd let himself believe the uniform stood for something good. The station was abandoned, windows boarded, wind whistling through cracks. Greg stood out front, thick parka zipped to his chin, face shadowed by a baseball cap. He barely looked at Jasper, focusing on Lila. You're risking your job, your life coming here. You know that? Lila met his gaze, unblinking. I don't care. I want the truth. Greg looked at Jasper, his jaw set. You want to know about Phoenix Project? About what really happened to your horse? Jasper's hands tightened into fists. Yes. Greg glanced over his shoulder, voice barely above a whisper. Phoenix Project is a code name. It started as a joint operation. Local law, state boys, and Apex's private security. They said it was about finding unmanageable horses new homes, helping at-risk kids get off the street. In reality, horses got retired, shipped out or worse. Kids disappeared, money changed hands, files vanished. Jasper felt the ground tilt beneath him. And Sundance? Greg's eyes dropped. He was on a list, liability, Eliminated. I saw it myself. You were supposed to believe he died in the line. There were orders to keep it quiet. Make it look like heroism. Dr. Tran stepped forward, her voice shaking. And Ranger? Same. Last I heard, he broke loose during a transfer. They didn't bother chasing him. Figured he'd freeze or starve. That's what Apex does. Uses people, animals, then discards them. Lila's voice was cold. Who's behind this? Apex's founder, a guy named Colton Harker, runs the show. But local law's in on it. Sheriff Fenwick at the top. Half the department's bought or bullied. Ask too many questions. You get transferred, or you disappear. Jasper felt his anger rise, sharp and clear. Why are you telling us? Greg's eyes darted. Because I'm done being part of it. Because I still remember what it felt like to believe in the badge. I can give you files, passwords. But if they find out... A sudden noise, a car approaching. Greg stiffened. Go! I'll send what I can. Don't trust anyone, not even me. They scattered into the trees as headlights swept the old station. Jasper's heart thundered as he and Lila crouched in the shadows, watching two men in Apex uniforms step from a black SUV, guns at their hips. Back at Dr. Tran's house, they regrouped in whispers. The web was bigger than any of them imagined. Spun from power, greed, and the lies of people they once trusted. Dr. Tran, eyes wet, finally spoke. I lost a horse like this before. No one cared. No one listened. But I tracked every animal, every file. I have records, names, dates, photos. We can fight back. Jasper met her gaze, something new sparking in his chest, resolve and the first glimmer of hope. We will, for Sundance, for Cole, for all of them. In the hush that followed, a sense of purpose settled among them. The fight ahead would be dangerous, maybe deadly, but they were no longer alone, and they were no longer afraid to see the truth. Outside, the storm had passed, but a new wind was rising, one that would change Red Hollow forever. Jasper sat hunched over the kitchen table as dawn crept over Red Hollow, the cold seeping in through every crack in Dr. Tran's little house. Files and evidence lay scattered between mugs of untouched coffee. Outside, the world seemed frozen, but inside, everything was moving too fast. Lila returned from a call, her voice tense. We don't have long. Greg's sending us the files. He says the safest way in is through the cemetery. There's an old tunnel entrance behind the West Mausoleum. If we want to blow this thing open, we need hard evidence, names, records, maybe even survivors. She let that word hang in the air. Jasper glanced at Cole, asleep on the couch, clutching Ranger's halter like a lifeline. Dr. Tran nodded grimly. I'll stay here with Cole. If you're not back in 2 hours, I call the FBI. Jasper and Lila layered on heavy coats, stuffing flashlights and backup batteries into their pockets. Lila handed him a file. Greg's gift, smuggled out in the night. Jasper thumbed through it as they drove through the waking town, streetlights flickering in the morning gloom. List of names, photos, words like terminated, liability, transferred. At the bottom, a list of children's initials, Cole's among them, with notes. Behavioral risk, contain. The cemetery was quiet, just wind rattling bare branches. They moved like ghosts through the gravestones, breath misting in the air. At the rear, just as Greg described, they found a patch of ground half shoveled, a rusty mausoleum marked Holloway family. Lila checked over her shoulder, then pried open a small iron grate. The darkness yawned below, cold, damp, heavy with the stink of earth and secrets. Jasper led the way, flashlight beam quivering as they descended a stone staircase into the tunnels beneath Red Hollow. It felt wrong, like stepping into the marrow of some ancient beast. The tunnels ran for hundreds of yards, a warren of half-collapsed brick and timber. Here and there, old wooden stalls, water-stained and rotting, held bits of hay and horsehair, signs that animals had been hidden here, maybe for months. Lila kept pace, her own light sweeping across the walls. In one corner, a tangle of manes and tails, clipped, bundled, left behind like trophies. Jasper's breath caught as his light found a rusted metal door, battered from the inside, scratched and dented with hoof marks. He pressed closer, tracing the patterns. Ranger's brand, Sundance's name, and a child's scrawl. Cole was here. Help! He nearly collapsed, heart pounding. Lila steadied him, voice shaking. They locked them in, like criminals. On a low shelf, Jasper found a stack of files, weathered, stamped, confidential Apex ranching. The pages told the story in bureaucratic detail. Horse names, ages, reason for termination, signatures from men Jasper had once called friends. Sundance's file was near the top. Liability, eliminated. Incident report, officer survived. Someone had tried to black out the details, but Dr. Tran's earlier x-rays confirmed the truth. Sundance hadn't died protecting Jasper. He'd been targeted, silenced, because he'd refused to hurt anyone. Jasper's hands trembled as he let the file drop to the dirt. Lila was kneeling by the wall, her flashlight tracing dozens of scratch marks. Look, these are fresh, some from hooves, some from hands. Among the marks were gouges that spelled no trust and run over and over, as if someone had been fighting to stay sane in the darkness. Suddenly, a metallic clang echoed from deeper in the tunnel. Lila spun, gun drawn. Jasper pressed against the wall, every nerve lit. Footsteps, voices, two men arguing. Jasper recognized Greg's voice, tight with panic. "I did what you asked, but they're on to us." Another, colder voice. "Then you're a liability. Clean up now." A struggle. Jasper sprang forward, heart pounding, Lila on his heels. They found Greg on his knees, gun pressed to his temple by a man in Apex security gear, face hidden behind mirrored sunglasses, mouth twisted in a sneer. Jasper barked, "Drop it!" He raised his own gun, voice shaking with a mix of fury and fear. Lila flanked right, her badge glinting in the weak tunnel light. The Apex thug hesitated, just long enough for Greg to jerk sideways, throwing the man off balance. Lila rushed in, pinning the man with a sharp blow. Greg gasped, blood trickling from his mouth, but managed to toss a set of keys and a USB drive to Jasper. "Everything's on there, records, passwords, the whole ring," Greg coughed. "Get it out, fast." Footsteps thundered above, more coming. Lila grabbed Greg. Jasper stuffed the drive into his coat, and they retreated down a side tunnel, dodging beams of light and echoing shouts. They burst through a side exit into the blinding snow. Greg, gasping, managed a weak laugh. "You get the files?" Jasper nodded, teeth clenched. "We did, but they know we're coming." They made it back to the truck, careening away as black SUVs tore into the cemetery behind them. At Dr. Tran's, Jasper handed her the USB and keys. She plugged it into her encrypted laptop, eyes scanning line after line of evidence. Lists of horses, missing children, payoffs, and orders. Names and dates stretching back years. Lila knelt beside Cole, brushing hair from his brow. "We're going to fix this. We're going to stop them." Jasper sat on the floor, exhausted, Sundance's bridle in his lap. For a moment, he let himself remember the horse's warmth, his steady eyes. For the first time since the funeral, Jasper didn't feel alone. The darkness was real, but so was the fight. He closed his eyes, whispering a silent promise to Sundance, to all the lost ones. They would not run. Not anymore. Outside, the sirens of Red Hollow began to wail, calling the town to wake, calling the guilty to answer, calling justice out of the darkness at last. The afternoon sun cast harsh, blinding beams across Red Hollow Cemetery as Jasper, Lila, and Greg returned to the surface. Dr. Tran and Cole were safely hidden at a trusted neighbor's house, and the evidence drive now burned in Jasper's coat pocket. A time bomb of secrets ready to go off. Every step back up the stone stairs was heavier than the last, the tunnels echoing behind them like the heartbeat of a buried beast. They reached the top and paused, gathering their courage beneath the snow-laden pines. The town seemed eerily silent, too silent for a weekday afternoon. Jasper checked his phone. No signal. Lila's hands trembled, but her jaw was set, determination radiating from every muscle. Greg, pale and shaky, wiped blood from his chin and nodded once. "Ready?" he muttered. Jasper nodded. "Let's end it." They made their way down the icy path toward the police department, staying close to the shadows. As they approached, Jasper saw movement by the entrance. Lieutenant Carl Fenwick, the imposing head of Red Hollow PD, stood flanked by two Apex security men in civilian clothes, arms folded, watching the street. Fenwick's eyes were cold, his stance rigid. The weight of authority turned to menace. Lila whispered, "He knows. They all know." Jasper glanced at Greg. "Keep your head down. You've done enough." Greg shook his head. "We're in this together, Holloway. No running now." They crossed the street, heartbeats thundering. Just as they reached the curb, Fenwick barked, "Deputy Holloway, Detective Maris, inside. Now." The security men fell in behind, herding them through the front doors. Inside, the building was empty. No reception, no idle chatter. The air was thick with dread. Fenwick led them to the old briefing room. The blinds were drawn, overhead lights buzzing. On the table, a pile of folders, a service weapon, and a computer terminal logged in under Fenwick's credentials. He closed the door behind them, gun holstered at his side. "You've been snooping where you don't belong," he said, voice level but deadly. "Hand over what you found." Jasper stepped forward, steady. "It's over, Carl. We have enough to bring down Apex, and you too. It's all going to the FBI. Fenwick sneered, voice dropping to a whisper. "You don't know how deep this goes, Holloway. You want to be a hero? Heroes die in the snow, just like your horse." Jasper's hands shook, but not from fear. "You betrayed everything the badge stands for." Fenwick drew his gun, pointing it at Jasper's chest. "You think you're leaving here?" Suddenly, chaos exploded. One of the security men lunged at Lila. Greg dove, tackling the other. Jasper ducked as Fenwick fired, glass shattering, bullets splintering the wooden wall behind him. Lila rolled behind the table, drawing her own weapon. She shouted, "Body cam on!" Her badge clipped with a secret camera, streaming live to Dr. Tran's encrypted account. Jasper grabbed a heavy file box, hurling it at Fenwick, then charged, adrenaline drowning out pain. Fenwick fired again, grazing Jasper's arm. Lila, pinned by the other guard, kicked the man hard in the knee, sending him sprawling. Across the room, Greg wrestled desperately with the second guard, both men crashing into the computer terminal. The monitor blinked, files flashing across the screen. Evidence, payroll, code names. Jasper and Fenwick locked eyes. Fenwick snarled, "You're nothing without your horse." But Jasper remembered Sundance's final training, the way Sundance had once shielded him from a riot, responding to a single, sharp whistle. With a surge of instinct, Jasper fumbled for the old whistle on his keychain, brought it to his lips, and blew hard. The piercing note rang out, echoing down the empty halls. Suddenly, from outside, a deep, furious whinny echoed. A brown form crashed through the half-open doors. Ranger, battered but alive, mane flying, eyes wild, charged into the chaos. He knocked the security guard off Lila, reared up, striking Fenwick and sending him stumbling back. Jasper yelled, "Ranger, steady, cover!" The horse circled between Jasper and Fenwick, blocking any clear shot. In the confusion, Lila rolled across the floor, grabbing Fenwick's dropped gun, and leveled it at the lieutenant. "Drop it, Carl!" she barked. Fenwick hesitated, then lunged at Ranger, but the horse bared his teeth, backing the man into a corner. Greg, bloodied, managed to wrest the other guard's weapon away and toss it aside. Jasper, arm bleeding, stood face to face with Fenwick. "It's over. You're done." Fenwick spat on the floor. "You'll regret this, Holloway." Lila clicked her body cam, making sure it captured every word. "Save it for the FBI. They're already watching." Suddenly, the building erupted in sirens. Through the windows, black SUVs with federal plates screeched to a halt. Dr. Tran's upload had gone through. Armed FBI agents stormed the entrance, guns drawn, shouting commands. Within seconds, Fenwick and his men were in cuffs. Lila handed over the USB drive and the body cam to the lead agent. Jasper sank to his knees, finally letting out a ragged breath as Ranger pressed his nose to Jasper's shoulder. A silent, grounding comfort. The storm outside faded to a hush. Red Hollow's secrets, dragged into the daylight at last, trembled on the edge of justice. Jasper closed his eyes, remembering Sundance, his strength, his loyalty, the way he had always stood between Jasper and the worst the world could throw at them. Ranger's presence was like a living echo of all that had been lost, and now, finally, something that could be saved. Lila sat beside him, pressing a hand to his wound. "We did it," she whispered. "For Sundance. For all of them." Jasper nodded, tears burning, feeling, finally, that the burden of silence was starting to lift. Outside, the town of Red Hollow shuddered awake, and the longest winter of Jasper's life began to thaw. The sirens still echoed through Red Hollow as the FBI swept through the police department and fanned out across town. Their black SUVs cut through the snow, doors slamming, radios crackling with clipped urgency. For a moment, the town seemed frozen, every resident peering from behind curtains, the heavy truth of the day finally breaking the dam of secrecy that had held for years. Inside the station, Jasper watched as Fenwick and the Apex operatives were handcuffed and led away. There was no resistance left in them, only the hollow look of men who had finally realized the weight of their crimes. Greg sat slumped against the wall, head in his hands, while Ranger stood protectively by Jasper's side, flanks heaving, but eyes calm at last. Lila moved with quiet purpose, ensuring evidence was transferred, statements taken, loose ends tied. Dr. Tran arrived minutes later, leading Cole by the hand. The boy's eyes were wide, darting around the room until they settled on Ranger. He broke free from Dr. Tran, running to the horse and wrapping his arms around the animal's neck, tears soaking into Ranger's mane. Families began to gather at the edge of the police cordon, drawn by whispers and a deep, desperate hope. It was Mrs. Jensen, her face lined by sleepless nights, who first called out, "Cole!" The boy spun, barely able to believe it, and stumbled into his mother's embrace. The two clung together, rocking back and forth, as if they might never let go. Jasper turned away, blinking against tears that threatened to spill. He felt Lila's hand on his shoulder, a small, grounding touch. "You did it," she murmured. "You all did." The search moved quickly after that. Guided by information from Greg's files and the data Dr. Tran had pulled from the microchip, federal agents swarmed the cemetery and the tunnels beneath. They found evidence of Apex's crimes at every turn: stalls and cages, files and medical supplies, the last desperate scratch marks of horses and children. But most miraculous of all, they found survivors, frightened children, half-starved but alive, curled together in hidden alcoves, and two battered horses, Ranger among them, trembling but standing strong. It was a scene of chaos and relief. Parents collapsed to their knees, sobbing as lost sons and daughters were carried out into the light. Jasper watched, remembering the funerals he'd attended, the hopeless nights that had nearly drowned him. Now, as dawn crept in, it felt as if the whole town were breathing again for the first time in years. The FBI took charge, moving swiftly to arrest every Apex operative they could find. Fenwick was the last to go, hands cuffed behind his back, head bowed as he was loaded into a waiting SUV. He paused just long enough to lock eyes with Jasper, a look full of bitterness, regret, and the final admission of defeat. Jasper turned away from the broken man, searching instead for the people who mattered. Cole, still pressed against Ranger's shoulder. Dr. Tran, comforting a child who had not spoken a word since being found. Lila, her hand on Greg's back, offering forgiveness and a second chance. In that moment, Jasper realized that justice was more than punishment. It was the return of hope, the mending of what was broken. He made his way to the cemetery hill where Sundance lay buried beneath the old cottonwoods. The wind was soft now, carrying only the sounds of families reuniting and the distant call of crows. Jasper knelt at the grave, bridle in hand, letting the tears fall at last. He spoke softly, voice breaking. "You saved me, old friend. You saved us all." As if in answer, a warm gust stirred the snow, carrying with it the faint, wild scent of horses and the memory of hoofbeats on frozen ground. Jasper closed his eyes, picturing Sundance running free, his pain finally at rest. Behind him, footsteps crunched in the snow. He turned to see Lila, Dr. Tran, and Cole approaching, Ranger at their side. Dr. Tran knelt beside him. "He'd be proud of you, Jasper. You gave him a voice. You brought the truth into the light." Cole, cheeks flushed with hope, held out a small piece of wood, one of Sundance's old toys found in the barn. "He watched out for us," the boy said. "He never stopped." Lila placed a gentle hand on Jasper's shoulder. "It's not over," she said. "There will be hearings, trials. But today you can rest." Ranger lowered his head, muzzle pressed to Jasper's arm, as if bestowing a blessing from one lost partner to another. Jasper smiled, a deep, quiet peace settling into his bones. As the sun climbed above Red Hollow, the whole town seemed to change. Neighbors gathered in the square holding candles, sharing food, and watching as children and horses, once lost, were paraded through the streets in celebration. The wounds of the past remained, but so did the promise of a new beginning. Later, as dusk painted the sky in gold and violet, Jasper stood with Lila, Dr. Tran, Cole, and Ranger atop the cemetery hill. They looked out over a town forever altered, still scarred, still healing, but no longer afraid. Jasper pressed the old bridle into Cole's hands. "For Sundance," he said. "For every story that deserves to be told." Cole nodded, tears shining in his eyes. "For all of us." And as the first stars blinked awake, a gentle wind stirred the grass, carrying the sound of laughter, hope, and the quiet, unbreakable promise that no one and no horse would ever be forgotten again. The dust of chaos finally began to settle over Red Hollow. Days blurred into one another. Interviews, depositions, headlines that screamed about corruption, and the quiet but insistent work of piecing a broken community back together. For Jasper, each morning still brought a sting of loss and the ache of old wounds, but the shadows were lighter now, and hope had begun to push its roots deep into the hard Colorado earth. In the weeks after the arrests, the town gathered in the courthouse for the trials. Jasper, Lila, and Dr. Tran sat side by side beneath the old stained glass, their testimonies weaving together the story of what had been lost and what was finally found. Jasper remembered every face, every badge, every horse, every child's name scrawled in old logs. His words were heavy, but he spoke them with the clarity that came from pain endured and justice demanded. Outside, a crowd gathered daily, families holding candles and signs, survivors and their loved ones coming together not just in outrage, but in unity. Jasper saw Mrs. Jensen and Cole, arm in arm, and the sight eased something long clenched in his chest. In quieter moments, Jasper found himself wandering the hills, drawn to Sundance's grave beneath the cottonwoods. The wind was softer now, green shoots poking through thawing snow, birds returning to nest in the branches above. He knelt by the grave often, speaking to the horse as if he were still there, because in a way he was. Each memory, each lesson, lived on in the new life growing all around him. One morning, Jasper was invited to speak at Red Hollow Elementary. The gym was filled with children, their eyes wide and full of questions, their parents in the back row, anxious but proud. Jasper stood before them, Sundance's old bridle in his hands. He told them the story, not just of corruption and loss, but of loyalty, of what it meant to stand by someone, even when the world tried to tear that bond apart. He spoke not just of Sundance's courage, but of Rangers and Cole's, and the quiet heroism of people like Dr. Tran and Lila. He talked about how healing doesn't mean forgetting, and that the pain of truth is a burden best carried together. Some children cried, others squeezed their parents' hands. Jasper saw hope flicker in those young faces, the seed of something lasting planted in their hearts. Afterward, Lila handed Jasper a letter. She said she'd written it for her brother, the one she'd lost to a similar injustice. In it, she forgave the world and herself. She wrote, "Justice is not revenge. It's the light we shine in the dark, so others can find their way home." Dr. Tran was honored at a community ceremony. She stood on the courthouse steps as people applauded, her eyes shining with pride and sorrow. She used the moment not to celebrate herself, but to ask the town to remember every animal who had been lost, every life that had gone unrecognized. She called for the creation of a new, transparent search and rescue horse program, one watched over not just by the authorities, but by the community. This time there would be no more secrets. In the months that followed, Jasper helped train new volunteers. He shared Sundance's story, his mistakes, his triumphs, his sacrifice. With Ranger by his side, Jasper visited ranches, classrooms, and council meetings, telling anyone who would listen about the true meaning of service and the courage it takes to do the right thing, especially when it means standing up to your own family, your own history. He found healing not just in justice served, but in the connections that formed along the way. Dr. Tran and Lila became fixtures in his life, friends forged in fire, their loyalty as sure as the sunrise over the Rockies. Cole grew stronger, his nightmares fading, his laughter returning. Ranger thrived in Jasper's care, often seen leading children around Sundance Meadow, the new park built where the barn once stood. Jasper also learned that loyalty can be a burden. The badge he wore was heavier now, no longer just a symbol of authority, but a reminder of the cost of silence, the pain of complicity. He vowed never to ignore that weight again. As spring came to Red Hollow, Jasper hosted a town meeting at the new memorial park. People gathered beneath a sculpture of a galloping horse. Sundance, forever running free. Jasper stood before them, Ranger at his side, and spoke. We can't change the past. We can't bring back those we've lost. But we can honor them by refusing to turn away when others are in danger. Loyalty means standing for the truth, even when it's hard, even when it hurts. It means carrying each other, the way Sundance carried me, through storms, through fear, through darkness. He paused, scanning the crowd, meeting their eyes. We heal by telling the truth, by forgiving, by remembering, and by building a world where courage isn't punished, but honored. That night, Jasper returned to Sundance's grave, feeling, for the first time in years, that his partner's spirit was at peace. The stars were bright above, the meadow alive with the gentle sounds of horses and children. Jasper sat beneath the cottonwoods, head bowed, letting the wind carry his words. Thank you for teaching me what real loyalty is, for showing me that the cost of silence is too high, for leading me home. The story of Red Hollow would echo for generations. Parents told their children, survivors became mentors. The town, once broken by secrets, was now bound by something stronger. The shared weight of loyalty and the promise that darkness would never rule here again. 1 year after the longest winter Red Hollow had ever known, the town gathered in a new place, Sundance Meadow. The memorial park sprawled across the land where the old barn once stood and stretched all the way to the cottonwood grove on the rise. Wildflowers bloomed in every shade of gold and blue, bees drifting between them, the air fragrant with the first promise of summer. A simple wooden archway greeted visitors, in memory of those who carried us through the storm. Beneath it hung Sundance's bridle, weathered but proud, the nameplate glinting in the sunlight. Jasper stood just beyond, one hand resting on Ranger's neck, his eyes on the gathering crowd. He spotted faces old and new, Lila, Dr. Tran, Greg standing free at last, Mrs. Jensen with Cole perched on her hip. There were children chasing each other through the grass and horses grazing quietly along the fences. The gentle rhythm of life returned. The town had changed in ways both visible and invisible. The wounds were still there. Some scars would never fully heal, but hope had taken root, deep and stubborn. Where secrecy and silence once reigned, now people spoke openly of what had happened, and what must never happen again. The SAR program thrived, now a community endeavor. Every animal and handler watched over with transparent care. Sundance's story became the heart of its training, an example of loyalty that asked nothing in return except for truth and kindness. As the crowd settled, Jasper moved to the front. He wore no uniform today, only jeans and a simple shirt, the badge packed away in a drawer at home. The sun was warm on his face. Ranger stood by his side, a living testament to resilience. Jasper began quietly. A year ago, many of us stood here with nothing but grief and confusion. We had lost friends, family, our sense of safety. I'd lost a partner, Sundance, who saved me more times than I can count. Back then, the truth was buried deeper than the snow. He paused, looking at the memorial, letting the words settle. But I learned something in the months that followed. The darkness wasn't just in the lies people told, or the things they tried to hide. The darkness lived in the silence we kept out of fear. And it's only when we speak, only when we reach out to each other, that we bring the light back. He looked at Cole, standing beside his mother, his face open and bright. Courage is not just running into danger or standing up to bad men. Courage is telling the truth, even when your voice shakes. Courage is forgiving yourself and others, so you can heal. Sundance taught me that. Jasper glanced at Lila and Dr. Tran, their eyes shining. Real service isn't about a badge or a title. It's about protecting the innocent, even when the cost is high. It's about loyalty, but loyalty that's brave, not blind. Loyalty that demands we stand up, speak out, and do better for the next generation. He stepped aside as Cole approached, carrying a wreath of wildflowers. The boy laid it gently at the foot of the memorial, then turned, and in a voice stronger than Jasper remembered, addressed the crowd. Sundance helped me. Ranger, too. When I was afraid, they were brave for me. I want to be brave, too. The crowd broke into quiet applause, tears slipping down more than a few faces. Dr. Tran stepped up next, her hand resting on Ranger's mane. We've seen what happens when people look away. We've seen what happens when animals and children are treated as expendable. Today, we honor not just the ones we lost, but the promise that we'll never let it happen again. This meadow will be a place for healing, for stories, for new beginnings. As the ceremony ended, children gathered around Ranger, braiding his mane with ribbons, laughter ringing out across the fields. Lila and Jasper walked the edge of the meadow together, the past year unspoken between them, the bond forged by fire stronger than either could have imagined. Lila smiled softly. Do you ever wonder what Sundance would think of all this? Jasper looked toward the horizon, the sun rising over the cottonwoods. I think he'd be proud, not just of me or you or Ranger, but of all of us, for choosing truth, for building something better from everything we lost. The two friends watched as Ranger led a line of children around the meadow, patient and steady. Jasper felt a quiet peace settle in his chest, the ache of grief transformed into gratitude. As dusk approached, lanterns were lit across the meadow, each flame a small promise never to forget. Jasper found himself back at Sundance's grave, now marked by a new headstone carved with a single word, loyalty. He knelt, fingers tracing the letters. Thank you, he whispered, for everything, for showing me how light returns, even after the coldest winter. Above him, the first stars appeared. Ranger approached and nuzzled Jasper's shoulder, standing watch beside him as the sky grew deep and blue. In that stillness, Jasper understood the final lesson, the kind that lives beyond words, in the quiet spaces between one heart and another. That courage, once kindled, never truly dies. That the bond between a person and a good horse, or a loyal friend, can outlast even the darkest storm. And as the people of Red Hollow made their way home under the lantern-lit sky, Jasper, Ranger, and Cole stood together atop the hill, watching the future rise. The story of Sundance was now part of them all, a story of pain and justice and hope that would ripple outward for generations to come. Sundance's legacy was secure, not in monuments or medals, but in the quiet, daily acts of courage and kindness that shape a better world. And as dawn crested the mountains, the meadow glowed, and Red Hollow's long night was finally over.